When you talk about invitations, you didn't say this, but like signposts, right? Things that might show up in our daily life that can maybe point us toward uncovering our purpose or sort of solving the mystery of what our purpose is. How have you seen that unfold for people?
So there's a couple ways that I've seen that unfold. I mean, there's the typical Venn diagram that people have seen many times and I've written about and shared many posts on of kind of what purpose is, this combination of what you're great at and what the world needs and what you love to do and what you get paid to do. It's got this philosophy called Ikigai. But, and a lot of people look at that and say, okay, great, here's a fundamental way to find my purpose or how to shape my career, how to step more into doing what it is I'm good at, the world needs. But one of the things that I have found, and this is very relative to your work and something that resonates deeply with me, is that the thing that often ushers us into purpose are the challenges that we face in life.
All right, welcome back, Flourish or Fold listeners, for some more stories of resilience. We have an incredible guest today, Davin Salvagno. Now, if you've ever been in a moment in your life where you wondered, what is your purpose? What are you meant to do? You are in luck because Davin is not only a best-selling author and inspirational keynote speaker, he's also an expert on leadership and purpose. And I can tell you that so many people that I speak to, that I coach, if there's one thing that I think just, sort of, needles at people is this idea of like, what is my purpose? Yeah. What am I meant to do in life? So I'm so happy to have you on the show to talk about how it is we continue to move toward uncovering our life purpose. So welcome to the show, Davin.
Thank you so much, Taryn. I am so excited to be here with you. We had some great conversation early on just before this. I love your work on resilience. I love your invitation to be vulnerable and to focus on the things that challenge us and change us and that make us who we are. And so I'm really excited about our conversation today. Thank you for taking the time.
Me too. I'm so excited too. I think it was Mark Twain who said, the two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and the day you find out why.
One of my favorite quotes.
One of my favorite quotes too. And yet, I feel like it's a real misnomer because yes, we are born on a day, but I think very few people inside of a day actually uncover the full complement of their purpose.
That is so true. And it's so good because I think one of the biggest problems with purpose is we think of it as a singular grandiose idea for our life, right? Even Mark Twain's quote says that, right? If you think about it, the day you're born and then the day that you find out, as if it's a one-time event.
Right.
But it really isn't a one-time event. So even though it is one of my favorite quotes, I feel like there are multiple days that we find out why. There are multiple moments within multiple days that we find out why. And so we could argue that maybe from a spiritual element that there's a grandiose purpose for our lives, but on a more practical and understandable and tangible way, purpose shows up in our lives every single day, moment by moment, if we're looking for it. There's invitations for us to step into it if we're aware.
That's really powerful. And so I think this is one of the things that people grapple with. So I want to go a little bit deeper here. When you talk about invitations, you didn't say this, but like signposts, right? Things that might show up in our daily life that can maybe point us toward uncovering our purpose or sort of solving the mystery of what our purpose is. How have you seen that unfold for people?
So there's a couple ways that I've seen that unfold. I mean, there's the typical Venn diagram that people have seen many times and I've written about and shared many posts on of kind of what purpose is, this combination of what you're great at and what the world needs and what you love to do and what you get paid to do. It's this philosophy called Ikigai. But, and a lot of people look at that and say, okay, great, here's a fundamental way to find my purpose or how to shape my career, or how to step more into doing what it is I'm good at, the world needs. But one of the things that I have found, and this is very relative to your work and something that resonates deeply with me, is that the thing that often ushers us into purpose are the challenges that we face in life. The things that usher us into purpose are the things that we hurt most deeply about, either things from a personal experience that we have endured and have become resilient in and overcome, and then we resonate deeply with that. And so we want to help people either to avoid that or to get through it or to share our learning moments with them, or just a basic challenge or need that we see in the world that's going unfulfilled that we want to do something about. So our greatest invitation to purpose often comes from the deepest pain that's within inside of us.
I love that because, gosh, when we are in it, when we are going through it in that moment of challenge, it can feel so senseless. It can feel so, like, why is this happening in my life, right? And the difference of like, okay, so I can say like, why is this happening for me as opposed to why is this happening to me? One of my beliefs, though, about challenge and change and complexity and the big 3 C's, and also about the inevitable pain that comes with those moments, is that God does not waste a drop of pain.
That's right.
In those moments of challenge. And that has been so instructive for me. Anytime I'm like, why does this hurt so much? And then I'm like, wait, none of this pain is being wasted. Every drop of this pain is going to be utilized in some way to form me. And I've thought about that as character. And so I love what you're bringing forward now, is that also these moments of challenge are some of the most powerful moments for us to uncover our purpose.
They are. And, you know, people often tend to avoid challenge rather than embrace it, which you talk about in your work. But one of my favorite things that you said is that, you know, there's not a period after the word challenge. There's a comma. And that comma is an invitation for us to write the rest of the story or to discover the rest of the story. And I've always found hope in that comma. I never heard it phrased that way until I read your work. But my life, I've joked about this earlier. I said, if I were to write an autobiography, it would be, the title of it would be challenge, comma, challenge, comma, challenge, comma, challenge, comma, and just one after the other. But I've always found hope in the comma, because people will say, oh, all things happen for a reason, or all things work together for the good, or God's going to use us in some way, and we often don't know why in the moment. We want to know why in the moment, but we can't see it. And so the story that I've always told myself is that whatever this is, as much as it hurts or whatever, as much as I don't understand it, it's going to be used for a purpose. And I might not see it for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I might not even see it on the side of eternity. I don't know when I'm going to see it. But the thing that has allowed me to be resilient is to embrace that change with the comma and know that there's a story on the other side of it that makes the challenge worth it.
That's really, really powerful. And I love being able to hold on to that belief that there is some purpose that is going to emerge out of that pain on a timeline. We don't know necessarily when that will be, but it makes it all, I think, seem more worth it.
It does. And the thing, we've all gone through challenges. If you're listening to this, you've gone through challenges in your life.
Yep.
And the thing that we often need to do is actually look back at those previous challenges where there was that comma, and then tell ourselves what the rest of that story was, even though we couldn't see it in the moment, to give us the hope and strength to go through whatever it is that we're going through today. And in doing that, sometimes we discover the purpose in the moment for that. Sometimes we don't, and we have to wait to discover it. But what has allowed me to continue to be resilient, to continue to go forward, has been to continue to look back at all those previous challenges where I couldn't see the other side. I couldn't see what was happening. I didn't know the other side of the story. But then I learned what it was and then said, wow, okay, that's why that happened. In fact, the term purpose point, which we ended up naming the organization after, came from kind of a retrospect look back of your life. And looking at all these kind of moments, these crucible moments, as my friend Nick Craig calls them, these crucible moments that defined and shaped your character, your very being, as a result of going through those challenges, right? So what are those purpose points in your life? And you might be going through one right now, and it's just another purpose point, and you won't know it, for a little bit, but then you'll look at it and see it and say, that's why that happened.
Yeah. That's so good and so instructive. What I love about this moment where we're having this conversation is you have also been on a journey, right? You've got incredible expertise on how people understand, uncover, pursue their purpose. And you've also been in this moment of your own life of pursuing your own purpose in parallel, to that. We're recording this episode in Charlotte, North Carolina, but up until recently, you were a resident of the great state of Michigan, which is where I'm from.
That's right.
As well. And so I'd love for you to share with us, Davin, maybe a challenge, that's happened or maybe is happening in your own life. And how has that challenge formed you on your journey? How has that instructed you on your character? How have you found purpose to a greater degree, perhaps having walked through that challenge on your own?
That's such a great question. And my gosh, we could be here for days if I tried to pick one, because there's so many. But you just mentioned the move to Charlotte. I love the city. It's a great city. I did spend the last 25 years of my life in the great state of Michigan, where you're from, just north of Ann Arbor, not too far from where you were at.
Yeah.
And I'm originally born and raised in Philly. So I spent 20 years in Philly and then 25 years in Michigan. And now we're starting a new journey here in Charlotte. But this move to Charlotte, quite frankly, has been the hardest thing, the greatest challenge, without doubt, that our family has ever walked through. And it's been the greatest challenge that I've ever walked through. Prior to this, if you would have asked me that question, I would have said the greatest challenge was walking through my parents' divorce as a young kid and some of the trauma that unfolded from that now there's been healing and restoration from. But it took, decades, for me to kind of come on the other side of that. But this has been much harder than that, because this has been one incredible act of surrender. We don't know why we're here. We really don't. People are like, well, why'd you move to Charlotte? Is it because of a job opportunity? Is it because we could say, well, we moved the Purpose Summit to Charlotte. And so, as the steward of the Purpose Summit, it makes more sense for me to be here. But the reality is that we felt called to move to Charlotte. We don't really have any friends here. I've got some business connections who have become friends. We don't have any family here. We had a very nice, comfortable home in Michigan that we were raising our kids in, surrounded by people that we love, surrounded by friends that we love, surrounded by a church community that we had been in for 20 years. I still have an office in Michigan that I'm now flying back to every single month to see our team. So logistically, it's a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that we're here, and we don't know what that reason is, but we follow the call to be here. And in that, our entire family has had to make sacrifices. I mean, literally the last couple weeks, I've watched my wife and kids, cry themselves to sleep and then wake up not feeling at home. And so we talk about purpose, and I've got multiple purposes. I have a purpose as a husband. I have a purpose as a father. I have a purpose as an author. I have a purpose as a speaker. I have a purpose as a steward of the Purpose Summit. I have a purpose as a leader of Purpose Point. I have a, purpose as the new founder in Heart Count. I have a purpose as a worship leader. I mean, there's so many purposes. But I have to ask myself, what's important now, moment by moment? And there are times where, I walk in the door and I need to shut off whatever was going on, like this podcast or whatever I'm doing today. I know that when I walk in that door, I'm going to be facing my bride, Amy, and my kids who are walking through hurt. And I have to step in and be encouraging and strong and understanding. And a lot of times, Amy will joke and she'll be like, Davin loves coffee, and she'll pick up a coffee mug and there'll be like 2 drops left in it. And she'll say, Davin would say, this mug is half full, even though there's two drops in it, because I'm the eternal optimist, right? And I usually am. But this past Sunday, we were sitting at the kitchen table in our home that we're renting here in Charlotte until we figure out where our actual home is going to be. Mm-hmm. And I could just tell that, like, she did not need me to be a cheerleader in that moment. Mm-hmm. In that moment, I needed to tell her, you know what? It's okay to cry. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be angry. Mm-hmm. It's okay to not understand. And if we spend the next 2 months crying together, angry together, not understanding together, we're going to go through this challenge together.
Yeah.
And the thing that gives me the strength to say that and to step into that is knowing that there's not a period, that there's a comma, and that there's a story that's going to be told as a result of this unconditional act of surrender to move here. So I don't know how the story is going to play out. I don't know what the purpose in being here in Charlotte is, but all of the life lessons that I have learned previously from walking through those challenges have prepared me and shaped me and are now preparing our family and shaping them for what's yet to come.
Whew. That is a lot. Yeah. And you're in it right now, which is so powerful, because I think so often we hear about people's challenges after the fact, and with this sort of ability to have that hindsight 2020 view. And I really appreciate your vulnerability of showing up and saying, here's what's happening right now. We're really standing in that moment of comma where we can feel the challenge so acutely, and yet the purpose, the healing, the clarity, the direction has yet to emerge.
That's right. That's right. Someone said to me recently, and like it was a quote that I hung on to, and they said that, and this was a quote of Mother Teresa's. She said, "I never had clarity. I only ever had trust." And I was like, oh, that speaks so loudly to me in this season, because I don't have clarity. In fact, someone asked me on LinkedIn yesterday, they said, one day you're going to have to tell me how you ended up putting on an amazing summit and moved your family to Charlotte. And I said, only by the grace of God. I said, but here's the thing. It just wasn't those two things. It was putting on the summit, selling our house, traveling to the UK to do a conference over there, then packing our family up, then moving them to Charlotte, finding new schools for the kids. Oh, and my manuscript was due July 1st in the middle of all of that. Mm-hmm. So the fact that my family is even still standing through the last 3 months is a testimony to resilience.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, you know, I used to joke about this. People, it was, I don't know how long ago it was, but I said, if you look at the word resilient, it's really re-silence, 2 words put together. And then I realized it's not really spelled that way. But I always thought of it that way, because here's what happens. You know, we have these thieves that come to rob us of our purpose, all these negative thoughts that start to attack us. And so we have to kind of silence those thoughts when they come. And we need to tell ourselves what's actually true.
Yeah.
And so anytime that I've had to step into moments of resilience, I've told myself, okay, what are the lies that I need to silence right now, right? To re-silence, because they keep coming over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I have watched my family step into that through this. And if I'm being completely honest, I mean,
I hope you are.
Oh, I am. No, lie to me. Don't be honest. Lie to me.
Give us a 50-50.
Yeah, 50. But you know, my kids have not really gone through a challenge. They haven't. I mean, they've been really shielded. This is the first major challenge that they're going to walk through. And so as hard as this is, I love that it is shaping character in them through having to step into this moment of having to be resilient, and for us to do that as a family together.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. You know, it's interesting. I had some of those same thoughts, right? Like about like breaking apart that resilience word. Like what are the sort of like, you know, kind of building blocks of this word? And so salience is actually a word.
It is.
It is.
What's it mean?
It's crazy. You're going to go nuts when you hear this.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So salience means to uncover within ourselves for the first time, or the first time in a long time, hidden strengths, treasures, capabilities that exist inside of us. I know, right? I know. Come on.
This is amazing.
Yeah. So that's what the word salience means. And so when we think about then this word salience, that is so rare, it's like not even on the SATs. I'd never heard of this word. With you know, then I've come to think about it. I love what you said about silencing the thoughts in our head. I think that is so instructive. And there's also this element of like the challenge, the change, the complexity, the big 3 C's shows up in our life to remind us or to uncover for the first time or the first time in a long time the hidden strengths, talents, capabilities that otherwise would be lying dormant if we weren't exposed to the moment that we were in.
That is so, so good. And we just literally came full circle from what we said earlier, right? Because if you think about it, when you asked me about purpose, and I said the way that we often find that is by going back and looking at those moments of challenge that we had to walk through, right? What were the strengths, gifts, talents, experiences, insights, the things that we learned from that? How did we show up in those moments to get through them? And then when the next challenge comes, we often have to go back and uncover those things to find the strength to go through it again. So resilience is this process of constantly going back and uncovering, right, those strengths within us, those things that made us who we are, so we can step into the present purpose of the moment. And this wasn't planned. Like, we didn't rehearse this. This is like an absolute 100% live, real, raw discovery in this conversation that I had not discovered before. Now I will never look at resilience the same way.
Indeed. Yeah, and I think there's something also really powerful about what you're sharing with us today, because a lot of times when we face challenge, I'll just use that word as like an umbrella term, it feels like it's like happening to us, right? Like, oh, I got into this car accident, I was job eliminated, I'm in a breakup, right? My partner, sometimes it feels like it's happening to us. But what's interesting about this challenge that you're sharing and that you're in the midst of is that you have very much been an active participant of choosing a path of challenge, because simultaneously you also are very much in faith that there is a greater purpose and a greater opportunity to be revealed by being here in Charlotte. And so I wonder if you'd just talk to us about what is that process for you and maybe also for your family of recognizing that there's a call, that there's something that you're meant to do, and even though you haven't been shown the full picture, how is it that you go about being in faith to the call that you're hearing? How have all of you aligned on hearing the same call? And, what are you doing in this moment of surrender to sort of nourish and sustain yourselves as you wait for greater clarity?
Wow, that is a very, very real and raw question in the heat of the moment of exactly what we are walking through. So there's 3 pieces there. Let me take that apart for a second. So the earlier thing that you said about most people see challenge as things that are happening to them.
Right.
And I will say this, not all of the time, but most of the time, challenge is happening for you. Not to you. There are some tragedies that happen in life that we can't explain, and we won't. And if we try to, we'll drive ourselves mad trying to explain them. And so it's not an all-encompassing rule. But for the most part, most challenges happening for us. So I choose to take, as long as there's breath in my lungs, and I'm here, and there's breath in my kids' lungs and Amy's lungs, I choose to believe that each moment is happening for us. So it's, first of all, having that perspective, right? What is this moment happening for? Even more importantly, who is this moment happening for? We tend to make things about ourselves. Sometimes it's not about us, right? Often we're walking through something that someone else 10 or 20 years from now is going to walk through. And then we're going to be used in that moment to say, let me tell you when. And we're going to be the voice of encouragement, wisdom, and insight, but we're not going to see it until then. And then you'll be able to say, oh, that's why we walk. So sometimes it's not just, what is this happening for? It's who is this happening for? And often that who is not you. We like to think it's about ourselves,
we do.
But it's often about somebody else. And then when that happens, you realize that, there's a greater purpose at work. And so your second question of how we discover that's happened so many times in my life, Taryn, that it's irrefutable to say that it's not true. So I can look over and over and over again. I joked about all those challenge commas. We'd be here for another hour if we talked about all the actual real challenges in my life. I mean, but like, cliff notes, my parents got divorced. We went to go live with my grandparents. I then ended up living in a bad neighborhood. I got attacked as a kid, had my head beaten up with a bat for refusing to buy drugs, lived in a terrible neighborhood, had a whole bunch of crazy things happen in my teen years, got ripped apart from Philly, moved to Michigan, basically did to my kids recently what happened to me when I was younger. And then there was just even more challenges, including losses and tragedies and things like that. But we're not going to get into those. But I can look at all of those, and outside of a couple losses that I can't explain, nor will I continue to try to, 90% of all of those challenges to date, I can look back and say, at some point, someone was placed in my life where I was able to be used as a voice of encouragement, of wisdom, of insight, to help them walk through what they were walking through, because I had walked through it. Mm-hmm. So 90% of those challenges didn't happen for me. Mm-hmm. They happened for someone else. Mm-hmm. And so when that happens over and over and over and over and over and over again, at some point it becomes a mindset. It becomes an expectation, right? You're almost waiting for the other side of the story. There's actually an excitement in it that is greater than the fear and the uncertainty of what you're walking through. So that's kind of been my personal process for understanding kind of how to see God's handprint in all of this. Mm-hmm. But the other piece of it, and just being very direct, has been through very direct answered prayer. So let me tell you a quick story. A year ago, I came to Charlotte in preparation for the Purpose Summit. I was doing site visits, and I was staying in a hotel room, and I was looking out over the city, and I felt this strong call that we were supposed to move to Charlotte. So I came home and I said to Amy, I think we're supposed to move to Charlotte. I think God's telling us to move to Charlotte. And she says, well, I think you're wrong. She was not on the same page.
She's like, I think God is not saying that.
Not saying that. So for the next 6 months, we were not on the same page. Mm-hmm. We weren't. And so there was this tension. And so then I came back down here in October for more preparations, meeting with sponsors for the summit. And I felt it again. And I came home, I'm thinking, we're really being called there. And she's still like, nope, I think you're wrong. And then in November, I prayed and said, listen, God, if you want us to move to Charlotte, I need you to speak as loudly to her as you're speaking to me. And if we're not supposed to move to Charlotte, if this is just some emotional reaction high because it's a new thing, new city, the summit, whatever it is, then keep this separation in between, because I don't want to do something to my family that you wouldn't have us do, and pull them out of all of this, sell our home and put us in this situation, and rent for a while, owning nothing, and just completely walking by faith and walking them through the season that I know is going to be hard for them. I don't want to do that if this is not from you. So my literal prayer was, if you want us to go, I need you to tell her very specifically that we are supposed to go. So 2 months go by, it's January, and we have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to re-enroll our kids in school. Mm. And if we don't re-enroll them, they don't get in because there's a waiting list for the school that they were in. So January is going by very quickly. Amy can't bring herself to press the unenroll button, and it's January 31st. And it's the last day to make a decision. And I feel very strongly that we're not supposed to re-enroll them, and she's kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. So I leave, I go to work for the day, and then I get a phone call. And she calls me weeping. And she said, I need to read you something. She had read in her devotional this morning 3 simple words: hear, period. Trust, period. Go, exclamation point. Oh, and the verse under it said, now the Lord said to Abraham, leave the land of your fathers and your kin and go to the land that I will show you. And she said, I think we're supposed to go to Charlotte. And that was all I needed to hear. And so our process for walking through this has been one of open-handed surrender, but then also leaning in to moments where we need to pray for God's very clear revelation and direction. And, sometimes it doesn't come immediately. It took months for that prayer to be answered. Mm-hmm. But we had clarity in that moment. We don't have clarity right now, mm-hmm. but we had clarity in that moment. Mm-hmm. And so I just told to her this weekend, she's a writer. She was a writer long before I was a writer, but it's one of her very gifted talents is being a writer. And she wrote a children's book that's waiting to be published, but I think she needs to write like a book. And I told her, I said, I was mowing the lawn the other day, and I kept on clinging on to these words, hear, trust, go. because it has just been so hard. I mean, the last 3 weeks have challenged us as a family. They've challenged our marriage. They've challenged every aspect of our lives. And I said, you know what? I'm going to journal all this stuff that we're going through, all these challenges, because when the comma comes and there's a story on the other side of it, they're going to be documented in a book for other people to read as a source of encouragement. And the title of the book is going to be Hear, Trust, Go. And I said to her, I don't think that's my book to write. I think that's your book to write. God gave you those words. So every moment of frustration that we experience from here forward, I want you to journal. I want you to write. And whether it becomes a book or not, whether it's a blog, whatever it might be, there's a purpose in this challenge. Maybe the reason that we're here in Charlotte is not for me. Maybe it's not the summit. Maybe it's for you. Maybe it's for you to step into your purpose as a writer in this season, right? So I don't know what it's going to be, but that's been our process.
It's a really beautiful process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And one of the things that I love about what you're sharing, and for me, it really differentiates the work that you're doing from other people that I see talking about purpose, is I see a lot of people out there making purpose look easy, making it seem seamless. Answer this series of questions, right? Just go through the 7 F's: family, faith, fun, finance, like whatever it is. And there's a real struggle, right? Like the struggle with purpose is real. And so what I love that you're bringing forward is not only that, there are moments of darkness, there are moments of uncertainty, there are moments of surrender, like speaking that into existence, and also being so courageous to share your story in this moment as an illustrative example to illustrate like what that looks and feels like in the moment.
Yeah. Well, everyone has this idea that purpose is fluff, and it's not. Purpose is the hard stuff. It's not fluff. We all aspire to maybe do great things or to achieve great things. And if you look at really all the people that history books are tattered with, all of them that accomplished great things, all of them that shaped history, society, just all of it. And you can look clearly at that there was a very definitive purpose for their lives, their story, their footprint on the history of humankind. It was filled with challenge. The road was not easy. Yeah. In fact, even in your book, you said that, the greater your vision, the greater your purpose, the harder the challenge. And that's true, right? And so I don't know where we drew this correlation that if we pursue a life of purpose, it's going to be easy. In fact, I just shared this in a talk that I gave last week in Milwaukee. I said, how many of you ever heard, the phrase, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life? I don't know where that came from, but it's the biggest lie that's ever been. I love what I do. I genuinely do. Yeah. But it's the hardest work that I could possibly imagine doing. I can't tell you how many times that I've just wanted to give up and say, you know what, I'm going to go back to corporate America. That was a lot easier. Right. Go back to my senior leadership role. Or you know what, maybe I'll just, go work at a library, right? Or a coffee shop, right? Like do the things that I love. I love to read. I love to drink coffee. Maybe I'll just play music, right? But if I did that, I would be robbing myself of the purpose that I was created for. I would be robbing maybe the world of some insight or encouragement or book or whatever that I'm supposed to write or share because I don't want to step into the challenge, because I don't want to step into the hard. And so many people are missing out on their purpose and their potential in life because they are so focused on the challenge and seeing it as something that they need to avoid rather than seeing it as something they need to step into, rather than seeing it as an invitation. And so I would offer that a life of purpose is filled with invitations of challenge. And the more of those challenges that we avoid, the more of our purpose we miss out on.
Woo! There we go. Snaps to that. I mean, that's beautiful. Taking us to church on a Thursday.
It is Thursday.
Is it Thursday? Or is it Wednesday?
No, it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
Getting my days wrong.
Oh, they're all
church on
together.
Wednesday.
That's right. Church every day.
Church every day. That's a beautiful segue into your next book that you have coming out. So you have the Purpose Summit here in Charlotte. We're going to put a link to that in the show notes so that people can learn more about that, sign up, come be a part of it. It's a beautiful experience. And you've also got a new book coming out called Thieves of Purpose.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for coming to the Purpose Summit last year. It was great to have you as a featured author there last year. Looking forward to having you as a featured author again this year.
Thank you.
And gracing us with your presence and your work. But the book, The Thieves of Purpose, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. This is my second book. The first book was called Finding Purpose at Work, and it was all about how you find purpose, and we've just talked about that. But this second book is about what prevents us from stepping into it, right? So you just talked about how it's a beautiful segue. I didn't do that intentionally, but I talked about all of these things that we need to silence, all these things that we need to challenge. So the book, I narrowed down to 12 different thoughts that are robbing us of our purpose and potential every single day, that are robbing us of the life that we were created to live. So thoughts like comparison. We love to compare ourselves to other people.
Sure do.
And the second that we start comparing ourselves to other people, we end up not focusing on what we're supposed to be doing in the moment, or the life that we're supposed to be living in the moment, because we're comparing ourselves to other people. And it used to be that one of my favorite quotes was, comparison is the thief of joy. I argue in the book that comparison actually is not the thief of joy, envy is. Because we like to compare ourselves to those who have more or are experiencing more. And in those moments, it robs us of joy. But very rarely do we compare ourselves to those who are walking through something or have less or are struggling, that maybe we should step in and help them. Because in those moments, it provides us gratitude, and then gratitude leads to joy. And so comparison can actually go either way. The question is, are you experiencing envy or gratitude? Right? And so each chapter kind of dives into these very real concepts, and I share different stories of things that I've walked through personally, and then different psychology and stuff to back it up. But thoughts like comparison, competition, fear, worry, doubt, excuses, lies, unbelief, indifference, quitting, and even success. Success itself can be a thief of purpose. If we just constantly pursue success in our lives, we will often miss out on significance in our lives. And significance is where purpose lives. It's not just about having your name in lights and getting followers and making a whole bunch of money and getting the car and getting the house and taking the trips, because all that's going to fade. At some point, you have to look back and say, where did I make a difference? Where did I make an impact? Right? I love the poem of The Dash, where you look and you've got the year you were born and the year that we're no longer here, and there's this dash in between, and that dash represents your life. That dash is not about what you attain or what you accumulate. It's about the footprint that you left while you were here, and that's where significance lives. And so I wrote the book from a perspective of, I really wanted to help people remove the stumbling blocks that were preventing them from experiencing the fullness of purpose in their lives, of what they were created for. But being completely honest again, I felt a little hypocritical writing the book. It was a really hard book to write because I still struggle with all 12 of them. And I wrote it from that place of not just, hey, I'm a subject matter expert and I've conquered all of these. I'm walking in this with you, and here's how I'm doing it.
That's beautiful. You know, I know that you have a very strong faith, that, you know, you and your family are very rooted in Christianity and followers of Jesus. I grew up Christian. I would still consider myself Christian, and, you know, lean into my faith and reading the Bible as one of the ways that, you know, I connect deeply with both spirituality and religion. And maybe we can wrap up here, which is the idea that in the Bible, I think one of the disciples asks Jesus about forgiveness. And the disciple says, how many times, Jesus, should we forgive someone who has wronged us? Is it 1? Is it 2? Maybe like the 3rd time's the charm, right? I don't think the disciple said that. Loose translation of the Bible. And Jesus says 7 times 70, which is 490. And I often wonder if that scripture can't be applied beyond forgiveness. If it's not just that we oftentimes need to work to continue to forgive people when that unforgiveness creeps in. But do we often get to try 490 times to find our purpose? To not let the thieves of purpose, indifference, unbelief, excuses, success, rob us and continue to stay strong, over and over when we're tested in our moments of purpose.
That's so good. And I believe that's true. I believe each of those thieves that I just shared, they're going to continue to come, right? The question is, when they do, have you learned to recognize them, and have you equipped yourself to combat them when they do? And so just like that great thought about forgiveness, no matter how many times, whether the number is 7 or 70 times 7 or 490 or 4,090, the question is, when you need to forgive, have you learned how to do it, right? Have you recognized the moment and learned how to do it? And I would say it's the same for all the thieves, right? There's going to be countless times where the thieves are going to come and try to rob you of the purpose that you were created for. When they do, have you recognized them for what they are? And have you learned how to combat them so that you can step into the challenge and be prepared for the story that's awaiting you on the other side of that comma?
Woo! Beautiful. Fire today. Davin Salvagno, thank you so much for being on Flourish or Fold, Stories of Resilience. We've got notes for all of our listeners on where to get your book, Thieves of Purpose, coming out very soon.
February 2025.
February 2025. We're excited. We'll put the link in there for people to pre-order. You've got the Purpose Summit here in 2025 in Charlotte. And thank you so much for being on the show. We're excited for people to follow you and to learn more about your work.
Thank you, Taryn. It's an honor having this conversation, being your guest. Thank you for your work, which has inspired me to be resilient and to continue to step into challenges in this life. Grateful for you.
Thank you. All right. So I'm thinking about that interview with Davin Salvagno, and purpose for me, and I think for so many people, it's this quest that we have in our lives, and it's also something that is really gut-wrenching for people, to be on this journey and to maybe not yet know what their purpose is, what your purpose is, and to be in a moment of uncertainty, of ambiguity, of not knowing and wondering, are you going to find your purpose? What is your purpose? When will your purpose be revealed? I think that is an incredibly important part of what it means to be human. And so I wanted to share something with you that has been really instructive for me in my life. That outside of that episode with Davin, I talked about the Mark Twain quote, where Mark Twain says, the 2 most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why. And I will tell you, in my experience, for me personally, and for so many people and founders and entrepreneurs and leaders, thought leaders that I work with, I've never met a person whose full life purpose was revealed to them inside of one day. It's really more about being on that journey. And so I've come to think about this as, if you're familiar with that children's story, Hansel and Gretel. So Hansel and Gretel, they're with their parents. There's a famine that comes. Their mother dies, unfortunately. The father remarries. And the stepmother says to the dad, look, there's not enough food in the house for everybody, so we're going to have to make some decisions here. And so what they do is they walk Hansel and Gretel out into the woods, which is where they end up, meeting the witch in her like candy gingerbread house. But something that Hansel and Gretel do when their father takes them out into the woods is Hansel has picked up all of these pebbles. He kind of knows what's going on, and he's put all these pebbles in his pocket. And so as they're walking out into the woods, Hansel is like dropping these pebbles on the ground at regular intervals. And so when it comes time for them to find their way back home in this children's story, they actually go back and they look for those pebbles. Now, you might be thinking, you're in the woods. How do you know one pebble from another? Were the pebbles still there? How did they not get moved? All those questions. But just sort of suspend maybe a sense of disbelief and questioning for a moment, because it's really a metaphor. And I think the metaphor for purpose in our lives is akin to the Hansel and Gretel version of purpose, as I call it, which is purpose isn't revealed to us all at once. I believe it's more like Hansel and Gretel, where we're in some unfamiliar place. For them, it was the forest. And we want to know how to get home. And home in this metaphor is like, how do we get back to ourselves? How do we, become clear on who it is we're meant to be and truly know and trust ourselves to a deeper degree? And so what I think that looks like is traveling on the road toward our purpose. And Hansel and Gretel do this to go home. They do it in the dark and by the light of the moon. And they just pick up a pebble on their path. And they know this is one of the pebbles that they dropped. And then they keep walking in the dark until they pick up the next pebble on their path. And for me, rather than purpose being revealed all at once, I think purpose in life really more looks like Hansel and Gretel. It looks like being in an unfamiliar place, being on some kind of road. We don't know necessarily how it's going to get us home. Being in some kind of darkness, not having clarity of sight, right? Visual sight, spiritual sight. And leaning down and picking up the next pebble and saying, oh yeah, I think this is aligned with what I'm meant to do. And then walking a bit longer in the darkness and finding the next pebble of purpose and the next pebble of purpose. And I think that's how purpose is ultimately revealed to us. Many of the things that I'm doing today, I did not know that I would be doing. We're publishing another book this fall called Triumphs of Transformation, Stories of Resilience. It's with 30 curated authors who are all telling their resilient stories. And it's sort of a hybrid of Chicken Soup for the Soul meets Stories of Resilience. When I published the 5 practices of highly resilient people about 1.5 years ago, I said I was never going to publish another book. It was so much work. It was so much time. I was so sick of asking people to buy my book and going on book tours. It was just so self-serving. But then so many people came to me and they said, I want to write a book. I want to write a best-selling book. I want to tell my resilient story. And I saw that you did that, and I want to do what you did. And it became very clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to mentor or coach all of the people that wanted to do this. And so we found a way to be able to do this compilation book with a series of 30 curated authors. Some of them are celebrities and household names, to tell their story of resilience as a way to uplift humanity, as a way to take their story of some of the darkest times that have happened for them in their life. I'm telling a story about a time in my life. And through healing, through perspective, through reflection, to actually get to a point with that darkness where now we're retelling our resilient stories in a way that we are making those stories a light that we can shine out into the world and on other people's paths who are in their own moment of darkness. And so for me, the power of story is really the greatest human alchemy that we can engage in. And what I mean by alchemy is when we take those dark times in our life and we do our own work, our own therapy, our own reflection, our own making sense of things, our own healing, and then ultimately are able to retell that story, we do it in a way that allows us to take the dark times in our life and effectively transform them into a light that we can shine on someone else's path. In the words of Brene Brown, we become part of someone else's survival guide. So I'm so excited to share that book with you in November of this year, 2024, Triumphs of Transformation, Stories of Resilience. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about that came up for me in my conversation with Davin is he talked about this idea of like resilience for him is sort of about like the silence, part of resilience, the silencing our own thoughts, the being aware of our self-talk that is not serving us, silencing the disbelief, the doubt, the fear, maybe even silencing the things that in his book, Thieves of Purpose, will detract from our purpose. And I think anytime we're going through a difficult time, it's really important to be aware of our thought process. It's really important to be aware of what we're saying to ourselves in that moment of challenge. And I think there's two ways that we can respond to ourselves when we find ourselves, having thoughts and moments of challenge and uncertainty and ambiguity. So the first way that we can respond to ourselves is we can listen to ourselves. We can listen to our own thoughts. And I think listening to ourselves is valuable. I think it's important for us to connect deeply with ourselves, to listen to the wisdom and the still small voice that is within us, to listen to what are the sort of direction that might be coming through in our thoughts, even to identify and validate the feelings that we're having in that moment. To listen to ourselves is really important. And I also think it's important to talk to ourselves. And the moments I think when we want to stop listening to ourselves and start talking to ourselves is when we're having negative self-talk, when we find ourselves putting ourselves down, telling ourselves, look, like that's never going to happen for you. Telling ourselves we don't have what it takes, telling ourselves that we don't have the characteristics that we need, the strength, the perseverance, the focus, the connections, whatever it is. And so I think it's really important for us to listen to the wisdom that exists within ourselves, to listen to that still small voice, to listen to and validate and appreciate our feelings, all feelings that we feel are valid. And when we feel those thoughts transitioning into being negative thoughts, being thoughts that detract from us, that's the time I think for us to also transition from listening to ourselves to taking control of that narrative and talking to ourselves and saying, look, what happens if it does work out? What will it look like when I've been successful here? Who else do I need to bring around me to support me in this moment? I'm doing my very best. Some of my days might be a better best, and some days might be a not as good best, but I'm giving my best every day. And so I think when we start to transition into those negative thought patterns in the moment of challenge, when we're being formed in our purpose, as Davin talked about, it's important to talk to ourselves, to take control of our thoughts, to take control of the narrative of our mind, and to not let negative thoughts that are going to detract from us, that are going to disempower us, that are going to make us not feel hopeful about the situation, to allow those things to live rent-free in our mind. So those were some of the thoughts that I had about the episode with Davin. I absolutely loved that interview. I'll look forward to hearing what you think about sort of the Hansel and Gretel version of how we find our purpose as pebbles on the road. That was a lot of fun for me to think about that metaphor and share it with you. And also to remember that there are moments and to be aware of when we need to talk to ourselves and when we need to listen to ourselves. So thank you so much, incredible Flourish or Fold listeners, for being here for another episode of Stories of Resilience. It is such an honor to share this podcast with all of you, to have incredible guests like Davin, and just to hear your feedback. So thank you for sharing this episode with your friends and family, with people that are near and dear to you. And I look forward to hearing your impressions. So go ahead, post on social media. Let me know what you're thinking and feeling. Where are you listening to this episode in the world? I'd love to know. If you share on stories, I'm glad to reshare your story. And thank you again for being devoted listeners. It's an honor and a true privilege to create content for you. Until next time, this is Dr. Taryn Marie. Hey there, Flourish or Fold listeners. As a mental health professional and someone who cares deeply about our overall health and wellness, what I know for sure is that our mental health doesn't just stop below our neck. Mental health is about feeling not only great in our minds, it's also about feeling great in our bodies. Now, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of information about new weight loss drugs, injectable weight loss drugs that are either on back order, completely inaccessible, or if you have access to them, so expensive that the vast majority of American people cannot get a hold of them. Well, I made it my mission to find a way for everyone to have access to these medications in a way that is affordable, because I see how life-changing they are for so many people. Now, I've spent months vetting companies, and I'm excited to announce that I believe I have found the very best. I've partnered with bodycaremd.com because they offer the highest grade weight loss medications. These are called GLP-1s. I have been to their FDA registered facility, and I've watched them make this product myself with my own eyes. Bodycare MD provides the absolute best weight loss medications. And if you want to get to the weight that you have desperately struggled to get to for years with diet and exercise and simply nothing works, there's no shame in wanting to feel better, to have more energy, to have more confidence in the way that you look. You're going to go to the website, and I've got a code for you to get 20% off. It's Dr. Taryn, Dr. Taryn, Taryn 20. You'll get 20% off your first month. You will answer some questions online, and you'll be connected with a network of licensed doctors in all 50 states who will carefully review your medical records and ensure that you're a good candidate. So check out Bodycare MD, enter the code Dr. Taryn 20 and receive 20% off your first order. Here's to having access to these medications that have been in short supply, and of course, having the opportunity to have the body, the energy, and the health that you've always dreamed of.